Have you ever wondered why, after decades of research, billions of dollars, and oceans of human suffering, there is still no cure for cancer? Imagine this. You're sitting in a sterile hospital room. Fluorescent lights hum above. A doctor in a white coat delivers a diagnosis with calm detachment. The word cancer enters your ears like a slow poison, and suddenly your life fractures. From that moment, you're not a person anymore. You're a patient. You're a battleground. You're a ledger entry in a multi-trillion-dollar industry. But what if, just what if, the cure already exists? This is not a question of science. This is a question of shadow. Because buried beneath our institutions, somewhere between profit margins and patent law, lies a whisper so dangerous that no one dares to speak it out loud. What if cancer was never meant to be cured? In Jungian terms, cancer is more than just disease. It is the embodiment of the collective shadow of our civilization. A manifestation of disconnection, overconsumption, and spiritual disintegration. Modern man, divorced from nature, from meaning, from soul, lives in constant inner decay. Cancer is the biological mirror of that psychic rot. And yet, every year, we funnel more money into research, more drugs, more radiation, more surgeries, but no cure, only treatments, only management, only the illusion of progress. Why? Because a cured patient is a lost customer. There's an old whisper among renegade scientists and holistic doctors. The cure was found, but it wasn't profitable. In the 1930s, Royal Raymond Rife claimed to have developed a machine that destroyed cancer cells using specific electromagnetic frequencies. He was later discredited, his lab raided, his machines destroyed. Coincidence or design? In the 1970s, Latrial, vitamin B17, derived from apricot seeds, sparked global attention. It was banned, ridiculed, buried. The reason? Insufficient evidence. Yet countless testimonies emerged of remissions, of healing, of hope. The FDA called them anecdotal. The media called them dangerous. The pharmaceutical giants, they remained silent. Silence is not absence. Silence is strategy. There is no room in the cancer industry for simplicity, no space for unpatentable plants, no place for cures that don't turn profits. You see, healing is not profitable. Treatment is. The financial structure of modern medicine is built not to solve illness, but to sustain it. From chemotherapy regimens that cost upwards of $100,000 to radiation machines that generate millions per year, the architecture of the system rewards recurrence, not resolution. And yet people still believe. They believe in the white coats, in the sterile corridors, in the logos of research foundations that parade pink ribbons and promises, while behind closed doors, shareholders toast to another quarter of growth. The deception is not loud. It is clinical, sterile, calculated. And you, yes you, might be feeling the chill right now. Because deep down, part of you already knows. You've seen loved ones waste away, despite the best medicine. You've watched the sparkle fade from hopeful eyes as the cycles repeat. Scan, chemo, prayer, despair. And perhaps a small voice inside has whispered, something isn't right. That voice is not paranoia. It is the voice of your intuition, the inner watcher, the part of the psyche that senses what the rational mind refuses to see. The conspiracy, if real, is not just political. It is archetypal. The pharmaceutical priesthood plays God not with miracles, but with silence. But what happens when that silence begins to crack? What happens when suppressed knowledge starts seeping into the collective unconscious like a forgotten dream returning to the surface? There is something sacred about a suppressed truth. It grows like a seed in the dark. It waits. And when the time comes, it returns, not as a whisper, but as a reckoning. And perhaps, just perhaps, the cure is not just medical. It is philosophical. It is spiritual. It is a confrontation with the machinery of a world that has lost its soul. Cancer is not one disease. It is many. It mutates, it hides, it adapts. But so does the machinery built around it. The industry has learned to speak the language of compassion while operating with the cold precision of a machine. Behind its charitable facades lies a labyrinth of profit and power, where clinical trials are often funded not to find the cure, but to shape the narrative. Do you think every failed trial was truly a failure of science, or a failure to serve corporate interest? Pharmaceutical giants do not see patients, they see markets. Cancer is not an affliction, it is an economy, a booming, ever-expanding marketplace worth over $200 billion annually. From chemotherapy drugs to hospital equipment, from insurance premiums to pink-themed campaigns, the entire structure feeds off perpetual illness. A cure? That would be an extinction event for 1,000 revenue streams. In such a world, hope is commodified, optimism is engineered, and any real breakthrough that threatens the flow of money must be silenced, or worse, ridiculed into obscurity. Consider the lives of the researchers who swam against the current. Dr. Stanislaw Burzynski, a Polish-American physician, discovered anti-neoplastons in the 1970s, compounds that showed promise in treating certain cancers. What followed was not celebration, but decades of harassment by the FDA and medical boards, millions spent not in replicating his results, but in courtrooms trying to shut him down. Ask yourself, if a therapy truly had no merit, why not ignore it? Why spend decades trying to erase it? Because ideas are dangerous, especially ones that suggest healing can come from outside the accepted structure, outside the patent system, outside the hands of the elite few who dictate what counts as science. Science has become a gate-kept religion, an institution policed by funding, peer review, and invisible strings pulled by those who profit from stagnation. And if you think that's too cynical, ask yourself why even Nobel Prize winners, once they challenge the system, find their grants revoked and reputations dragged through the mud. There is a term in psychology, cognitive dissonance, when the truth we suspect doesn't align with the world we trust. The mind rejects the truth, not because it isn't clear, but because it's unbearable. It is easier to believe in the benevolence of white coats than to question the morality of a system we depend on for survival. But the unconscious never forgets. And in that silent space between diagnosis and death, many feel the weight of what was never spoken. And here's the irony. Nature, for thousands of years, has offered remedies in plain sight. Plants like turmeric, graviola, mistletoe, cannabis, many with documented anti-cancer properties, have been known to traditional cultures and even studied in early Western literature. But they are too wild, too free, too unpatentable. So they're discredited, labeled as pseudoscience, buried beneath layers of jargon and regulation. And yet, their roots persist because truth is resilient. What if healing doesn't lie in another lab? What if it lies in restoring balance, psychologically, spiritually, biologically? Jung wrote that illness is often the cry of the soul, longing for transformation. Could cancer be the scream of a self fragmented by trauma, isolation, toxic environment, and spiritual starvation? And if so, could the real cure begin with integration, with facing the shadow rather than suppressing the symptom? You are not a statistic. You are not a subject in a clinical trial. You are a living system of body, mind, and spirit. But modern medicine forgets this. It carves, burns, and poisons without asking what wounded the soul in the first place. Healing begins where silence ends. And that silence, long protected by profit and pride, is starting to tremble. So here we stand, a society that has invested more in managing disease than in understanding its cause, a civilization that has forgotten the wisdom of its ancestors. Have you ever wondered why, after decades of research, billions of dollars, and oceans of human suffering, there is still no cure for cancer? Imagine this. You're sitting in a sterile hospital room. Fluorescent lights hum above. A doctor in a white coat delivers a diagnosis with calm detachment. The word cancer enters your ears like a slow poison, and suddenly, to understand the mechanics of concealment, one must look not to isolated villains, but to systems so vast, so normalized, that their cruelty becomes invisible. The modern medical-industrial complex is not a conspiracy orchestrated by a few men in dark rooms. It is far more terrifying than that. It is a self-sustaining machine, built over generations, whose gears are greased by incentives, and whose pulse beats in sync with quarterly earnings reports. Hope is the currency it trades in. Desperation is the fuel. When a person is diagnosed with cancer, they enter not a temple of healing, but a maze of protocol. There is no time to pause, to think, to explore. The system rushes them through blood tests, imaging, consultations, second opinions, until they are too emotionally exhausted to question anything. Start chemotherapy next week, they're told, as if healing were a schedule, as if life could be saved by a calendar entry. In truth, there is rarely time for contemplation, because contemplation is dangerous. It opens space for doubt, for awakening, for rebellion. The protocol is a kind of psychic hypnosis, and like all deep forms of trance, it keeps the soul compliant while the body is broken. A patient in despair is more obedient. A patient in pain is less likely to read, research, resist. And so, the cycle continues. But there's more. Have you ever wondered why natural treatments are excluded from most trials? Why the very suggestion of non-pharmaceutical options is met with smirks, disdain, or silence? It's not just about evidence, it's about ownership. The moment a remedy cannot be patented, it is dismissed. No matter how many cultures have sworn by it, no matter how many anecdotal healings exist. Science, in this system, is not a search for truth. It is a legal framework for control. The gatekeepers of modern medicine have constructed a fortress of evidence-based practice, designed not to illuminate, but to filter. They determine what counts as valid, what counts as real, and what counts as heresy. And in doing so, they've created a reality where only that which serves the system is allowed to exist. All else is erased, not by fire or force, but by absence. Jung said, "The greater the tension, the greater the potential." And perhaps that is why more and more people are beginning to feel it, that tension rising within the cracks of the system, a pressure building between what they are told and what they intuitively know. The pharmaceutical giants do not need to lie. They simply omit. They obscure. They flood the world with so many partial truths that the full truth drowns in noise. They patent minor variations of the same drug to extend profit lifespans. They invest in lobbying to keep alternative research defunded. They control medical schools, journals, and conferences, and all the while they wear the mask of saviors. But masks crack, and the more humanity suffers, the more these masks begin to lose their luster. If healing were the true goal, then the system would empower patients. It would fund prevention. It would prioritize soil quality, food integrity, mental health, and trauma recovery. But healing demands something that this system cannot offer: wholeness. And wholeness is not profitable. What happens when a society turns its back on the root of illness? What happens when a civilization believes that sickness is random and healing is external? It becomes vulnerable to tyranny, not of politics, but of ideology. It forgets that the body is not a machine, but a metaphor, a living mirror of the soul's condition. And so we ask again, was the cure buried? Or has healing always been here, subtle, quiet, unfashionable, ignored because it doesn't speak the language of empire? The silent cure may not be a single pill or a forbidden therapy locked in a vault. It may be a worldview, one so ancient and natural that it became unseeable, one where the body heals when the soul is heard, one where the system is no longer needed because the human being has remembered its own sacred intelligence. But the system does not want you to remember, because the moment you do, its power ends. There is a reason the doctor's coat is white. It is a symbol of purity, of trust, of authority. It drapes over the human beneath, like a holy robe, reminding the patient that they are in the hands of someone who knows, someone who sees what they cannot. But what if the white is not purity? What if it is concealment, a sterile veil hiding the moral ambiguity of an empire that does not serve life, but business? The doctor, in many cases, is not the villain. He is the pawn, the loyal acolyte trained not in healing, but in management, in protocols, in pharmaceutical algorithms. From the moment they enter medical school, future physicians are taught to diagnose, prescribe, and refer. They are drilled in pathology, but offered almost nothing in nutrition, in root cause, in emotional trauma, in the soul. They learn to treat symptoms, not systems, to suppress signs, not understand them, to conquer disease, not listen to it. This is not science. This is warfare disguised as medicine. The soul of the healer, the ancient archetype found in every culture, is lost in sterile rooms and board-certified checklists. The modern doctor is overworked, under-rested, and buried in paperwork. Many begin with noble hearts, but slowly break beneath the machinery. And those who awaken, who question, who wander off script, are warned, then punished, then removed, because the system does not tolerate memory. It does not forgive deviation. But something older is waking. You can feel it, a rising rebellion in the unconscious of the collective. More and more people are turning away from the white coat, not out of ignorance, but out of grief. They no longer see wisdom in the endless prescriptions. They no longer find comfort in being sedated instead of understood. They sense that something essential has been lost, and they are hungry for it. And here, in this hunger, lies the threshold. To question the silence around the cancer cure is to begin a descent, not into paranoia, but into the shadow, into the buried truth that our institutions were not made to heal us. They were made to contain us, to convert the sacred mystery of the body into codes, labels, and billable procedures. Healing is not a mystery to be solved. It is a relationship to be restored. Carl Jung spoke often of the process of individuation, the slow, painful journey of becoming whole by integrating the denied and disowned parts of the self. What if, in the same way, our society must confront the disowned parts of its medical psyche? What if the question is not just where is the cure, but why did we abandon the conditions that once made illness rare? We live surrounded by carcinogens, chemical-laden foods, poisoned air, electromagnetic smog, emotional isolation, chronic stress, broken circadian rhythms, but none of these are treated at the source. Instead, we wait. We wait until the body screams. Then we intervene, not with correction, but with attack. We call it treatment, but it is punishment for a system we've all helped build. You reading this might feel both anger and helplessness. That is part of the shadow work, because awakening begins in rage, but must end in responsibility. It is not enough to blame. We must remember. Remember that the body is intelligent, that it does not betray, it signals. That illness is not punishment, it is conversation. That healing is not in the hands of men in towers, but in the choices we make when no one is watching. There may never be a press conference where the cure is announced. No magical unveiling of a hidden serum. Because perhaps the true betrayal is not that a cure was buried, but that we were taught to stop looking within. The silent cure was never in the vaults. It was in the soil, in the breath, in stillness, in the refusal to live out of rhythm with the laws of life. And when we violate those laws long enough, the body reminds us, with pain, with disease, with the whisper, something is not aligned. So the next time someone tells you that healing is only found in hospitals, ask yourself, who benefits from your forgetting? And more importantly, what would happen if you remembered? There is a subtle genius in how the truth was buried, not beneath layers of lies, but beneath layers of distraction. In the modern world, forgetting is not an accident, it is a design. A society ruled by stimulus and speed forgets not because it is stupid, but because it is overwhelmed. In such a world, silence isn't just the absence of noise, it is the erasure of memory. The cancer cure, if ever it existed, was not simply hidden. It was drowned. Drowned in a sea of content, marketing, pseudoscience, fear tactics, and intellectual elitism. Every time someone suggested a natural remedy, it was countered not with evidence, but with ridicule. Every time a story of healing outside the system emerged, it was labeled anecdotal, irrational, dangerous. And thus, the collective mind learned to dismiss what it could not control. But this is not just about herbs, machines, or vitamins. This is about the human tendency to trade mystery for mechanism. Somewhere along the line, we stopped seeing healing as an alchemical process and began to view the body as a broken machine to be fixed by experts. We stopped listening inward and outsourced our wisdom. We stopped trusting nature and surrendered to the gods of synthetic chemistry. This forgetting is not innocent. It is archetypal. In mythology, the underworld is not a place of death. It is a place of remembrance. The soul descends to retrieve what was lost. And today, perhaps, humanity is descending. Not in fear, but in necessity, because something ancient is calling. A forgotten intelligence buried in the bones. And to retrieve it, we must pass through the architecture of forgetting. Consider the way medicine is advertised. Cancer awareness campaigns flood the media with soft pastel colors, smiling survivors, and slogans like, "Hope wins." But hope, in this world, is a product. It's carefully packaged, sold, and emotionally manipulated. The pink ribbon has become a brand. And branding is not about truth, it's about control. The question is not whether these campaigns are sincere. Many are. The question is what they prevent us from seeing. While millions march in charity walks and wear symbolic colors, the food system continues to poison. Corporations continue to lobby against transparency, and medical research remains choked by patent law. The pageantry of awareness becomes a substitute for actual change. This is not accidental. It is ritual. a distraction, masquerading as progress. And yet, despite all of this, the memory stirs. More people are leaving the church of conventional oncology, not in rebellion, but in longing. They seek not just alternative treatments, but alternative philosophies, modalities that ask not, how do we kill the tumor, but why did the tumor come? Therapies that engage the whole human, body, psyche, spirit, and ask the questions modern science dares not ask. What if healing is not linear? What if disease has meaning? What if the soul chooses its wounds to grow? To speak this way in academic circles is heresy. But in kitchens, living rooms, and quiet hospital corners, people are beginning to whisper it. The language is returning. The sacred is returning. And with it, the courage to question the white gods of the clinical world. There is something deeply stoic in this return. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." But in a world where life has been medicalized and reduced to data, perhaps the truest courage is not merely to survive, but to awaken, to live in alignment with the soul, even when that path leads away from authority, away from comfort, away from the herd. This awakening demands more than knowledge. It demands grief. Grief for the years lost, for the loved ones poisoned, for the trust betrayed, but also grief as initiation. Grief as the threshold that turns the victim into the seeker, the patient into the healer, the forgotten into the rememberer. Because in the end, the silent cure is not just a question of medicine. It is a mirror. It reflects how far we have strayed from the natural order, from our inner voice, from the wild intelligence of the body. And in that reflection, we are offered a choice: continue participating in the machine, or return to something far more ancient, far more alive. The body is not a battlefield, it is a temple, and the disease is not the enemy, it is the messenger. To kill the messenger is to repeat the cycle. To listen is to begin the healing. And when enough people listen, when enough people remember, the silence will break. Truth, once forgotten, does not die. It waits. It lingers in dreams, in intuition, in the soft trembling of the soul that knows something sacred has been stolen. And now, after decades of silence, that truth begins to rise, not as a scream, but as a reckoning. You can feel it, can't you? The shift, the crumbling, the deep ancestral remembering that healing was never meant to be this cruel, this mechanical, this impersonal. We stand at a threshold, not of medicine, but of meaning. The question is no longer, did they bury the cancer cure? That question, as important as it is, belongs to the past. The question now is deeper. What happens when the cure is no longer a pill, but a paradigm? To move forward, we must grieve, not just for the lost lives, but for the lost world view, the one that believed healing was external, that surrendering to the system was virtue, that white coats were always holy. That paradigm is collapsing. It must, because what's rising in its place is not rebellion, but rebirth. Across the world, a quiet revolution is blooming, not in labs, but in gardens, in breathwork circles, in ancestral medicine, in trauma therapy, in soul retrieval, in silent walks under stars. Healing is returning to the hands of the human being, not the patient, not the case study, but the human in all their sacred complexity. The doctors who dare to leave the system are becoming guides. The patients who survive against the odds become storytellers. The broken are becoming alchemists, and in their wounds, they carry medicine that cannot be bottled, sold, or patented. This is individuation, not just of the person, but of the culture. We are integrating the shadow we refused to look at for generations. We are facing the truth that what we called healthcare was often commerce dressed as care. And yet, in that confrontation, there is power. Because now we see. We see that illness is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is the soul's final attempt to awaken the person to their unlived life, to the parts of themselves that were denied, shamed, silenced. Disease, in this deeper language, is initiation. And initiation hurts. But it also reveals. The body is not broken. It is wise. It does not seek to betray. It seeks to be heard. And so, we return. Return to the rhythm of the earth, the wisdom of plants, the aliveness of the breath. We return to ritual, to reflection, to rest. We return to the truth that healing cannot be outsourced. It must be lived. You, standing here, reading these words, you are not powerless. You are not naive for questioning. You are awake. And once awakened, there is no going back to sleep. So ask yourself not just what is the cure, but what is this illness trying to teach me? Ask not only why did they hide it, but why did we stop looking inside? Ask not only where is the remedy, but what have I forgotten about my own nature, my own wholeness, my own worth? Because the final betrayal is not that a cure was buried. The final betrayal is that we were taught to forget our capacity to heal. And now, we remember.